I heard about that, and I was like, and here I was going, you look wide awake. It's like, oh, well, that explains a lot. So never mind. So thank you for filling in. Hi, Anita.
There are still some ornaments for Cookson Hills. Oh, I can't talk. There are still some ornaments for Cookson Hills pantry left out on the tree that's by all the tables. And check this out. I'm so excited. On the bottom of this box is the little ornament. It's on the bottom of the box. You all know I like the bottom of the box. Right? Right? Okay. So, there are still some of those ornaments out there. They're circles, whatever you want to call them. Okay? These houses are on a strict budget, and snacks that the kids love and want don't happen very often. Please bring all items back by November 28th. That's next Sunday. November 28th. Okay? Please have all items for Cookson Hills returned next Sunday. Remember, if you have a child's name, please mark their name and your name clearly on the gift. You guys, we gotta bless Cookson Hills. They're doing such good work over there, and we just want to bless them a little bit more with these snacks. So grab one of those, and in a minute I'll tell you about the storage. CCB Kids Christmas program is Sunday, November 28th at 10 a.m. That's also next Sunday. Woohoo! During Sunday service. We are in need of 25 dozen Christmas cookies for after the service. There's a sign-up sheet at the Welcome Center. If you would like to help with that, we still need at least 9 more dozen cookies. This is also next Sunday. Next Sunday's so busy. All right, so the sign-up sheet's out there. CCB Fellowship Christmas will be Saturday, December 11th at 6:30 p.m. It will be a fun night of Christmas karaoke and decorating Christmas cookies. Y'all should come. I get a host. You think it'll be fun?
Are you singing?
Oh. I'm hosting. I'm hosting. Carl says decorating means eating also. Yeah. Okay. Bell ringing for Salvation Army for CCB will take place Saturday, December 11th, 10 to 4. This time frame is broken into 2-hour time slots. You can sign up for this on the website, ccurl.org, under Connect, or you can use the scan code on the seat backs. If you need help signing up, please contact the office. Y'all, we gotta ring the bell. It's so much fun. The star trees are up, and yes, there's 2. 2 trees. Please take a star or 3. Purchase items, wrap, and bring back to the church by Sunday, December 12th. If you take a star with a dollar amount, please bring the money with the star to the office. Please return with the star taped to the bottom of the package. If you have any questions, contact Terry Wellman, Linda Herman, I think she's back there, or I, and we will help you. No, you do not wrap the $20. Please put it in an envelope and bring it to the church office. We don't need cash floating around, just floating around, right? I got it. Okay, so up here I brought 2 stars. Okay, one says snack, popcorn tin candy, adult man. Okay, so like you could get a popcorn tin full of popcorn and maybe another snack that you think a man might like, and put it together and wrap it together somehow with ribbon, whatever. And then the star goes where? Where does the star go? On the bottom of the box or tin or whatever. Please do that. Please, it helps us so much, you guys. All right. So there's many stars. Outside the wrapping paper. So like on this box, okay, on this box it says trail mix. This is a box of trail mix. It is not wrapped because they're going to use it for snacks, okay? So, but if you wrap a present, the reason I ask that is we got 5 families this year, and when all these gifts come in that you guys are bringing back these stars with, I have to go through and make sure everybody got everything, because if I have one kid not get 2 presents, that one kid's going to be really sad on Christmas. I don't need that, and neither does that family. We ain't doing that to no kid. Okay, got it? We ain't doing that. We're all organized. All right? So please put your stars on the bottom. They don't have to be taped forever. Just 2 pieces of tape is good. Keep them on there, but not forever. Okay? All right? It's not fun to pick on any time. If you want to do that, wrap something dumb and I'll play the game in front. Okay? Alright, so anyhow, I thank you guys all, because we really, blessing people in our community is an awesome thing, and our church has done a wonderful job in the past. We're going to do a wonderful job this year, right?
Right.
Right. Alright. Have a great day. Enjoy worship. Let's stand and continue worship. Sorry, my bad. There is no launch pad or armory this next week. It's Thanksgiving week. I am so sorry to interrupt worship. Have a good day. I gotta go to nursery, you know. It's not like I'm hanging out. Have a good day. You too. Woohoo!
I'm so glad you takes me Hallelujah.
So anything that goes wrong today is going to be Vanessa's fault. Just so you know. Well, good morning, church. Good morning. Man, it's good to see everybody here today. Thanks for coming here, whether you're online or here live. Thanks for being with us this morning, and happy Thanksgiving, right? Can we believe that's already here? Man, happy Thanksgiving. You don't have enough to celebrate. Next Sunday is the kids program during the service, so you don't have to listen to me. Yeah, there's another thing, right? Yay. So, exactly. So, anyway, let's dive in today with a quick series review. We're in a series titled It's All About Jesus. And we've been talking about a lot of the different things that end up standing in the way of Jesus in our lives and in the church. And we finished up last week discussing the topic of how our lack of serving in our God-given roles in using the specific gifts that God has given us to use in the church body, if we're not doing that, well, that's definitely going to stand in the way of Jesus. And so if you happen to miss any of those messages and want to catch up, you can always go back to the Christian Church of Burlington Facebook page, and the videos of those messages are posted there for that, those, or any other messages that you might want to catch up on. So, this week's message is a new topic, and it's a standalone message. I know, shocking, right? And it's going to sit around the topic of gratefulness and how our lack of gratefulness stands in the way of the church in our lives being all about Jesus. And I want to start with a question. In our society and culture today here in America, do you guys sense the same thing that I do, that gratefulness is by and large like Elvis and has left the building? Do you feel like that? I mean, as we look around and we watch the news and all of that, man, gratefulness is something that just seems to be a dying thing. And yet, what does God have to say about our being grateful? I think we need to really take a look at that. So let's dive in and begin with 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. We're just going to dive right in. And this is one of the Apostle Paul's letters to a young pastor named Timothy. And in this letter, he's giving Timothy all kinds of instruction and advice how to do his thing, how to be a pastor. And he gets to this section now in 2 Timothy 3, where he starts to also tell him, hey, this is what's coming. This is what we're going to start seeing more and more of as time passes. And this is what he has to say to Timothy. Excuse me. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. In these verses, essentially what Paul is describing is going to be the human condition, essentially, that's going to exist and actually even get worse in the run-up to the return of Jesus at the end of time as we know it. And Paul's description, unfortunately, sounds pretty familiar to what we're looking through today. Yet, I don't want anybody to give up. No one knows the day or the hour. Right? Jesus said that. In addition, there have been some very, very hard, godless times in the past, too. And so we don't really know for sure when it's coming, but it definitely is going to be ramping up as time goes by, these kinds of human behaviors that we're going to see. And so while we could talk about a lot of different things in these verses, the main reason I wanted to look at all of that is so you can see the context of the one word in verse 2 that I really want to focus on today. And it's where Paul mentions a condition that's going to accompany this run-up to the end of time. And he says that people will be, quote, ungrateful, end quote. And so why is being ungrateful so terrible that it's specifically mentioned in the list of behaviors that's kind of a death spiral, really? Because it's not only one of the behaviors that's going to lead to, quote, terrible times in the last days, end quote, but it's also going to be a result of those terrible times. And so again, it's kind of this circular death spiral kind of behavior. So why is that such a big deal that it's mentioned specifically in this list of behaviors? Well, let's explore this question by looking at an account involving Jesus and 10 lepers. So go ahead and turn, and I said lepers, not lepers. I don't hear about lepers. So turn to Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. And we're going to spend some time there. So if you want to turn there, again, it's not going to be one of those fast flyers. What I'm going to do again is we're going to read through this account to get the wheels turning, and then we're going to go back and break it down. So those verses say this. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into the village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go, for your faith has made you well." So now we've got that kind of percolating in our back to verses 11 and 12 and begin with those. Those verses again said, "Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into the village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance." I think we have to pause for a minute and talk about leprosy. Kind of the historical part of leprosy and what it meant through the Old Testament law and just the cultural norms back in the days of Jesus. The first thing I think we have to understand about lepers back in that time is they were outcasts of society. For several reasons, really. First, there was a general belief among the Jewish people that leprosy and any kind of wasting disease like that was a result that was brought on those infected individuals as a result of their sin. They did something bad, they did something wrong in their lives, and so God is reaching out and punishing them directly for that sin by afflicting them with leprosy. And so that was kind of a mindset of the people of that day. In addition, the Old Testament law required that lepers must live by themselves and keep their distance from the rest of the population. I know that a lot of us love the book of Leviticus, right? And so, as we think about that book, it's in that book, the Levitical law, that we see this all kinds of instruction about people that had infectious skin diseases and how they were supposed to handle that. They were supposed to go show themselves to the priest as soon as they saw something show up on their skin. And show themselves to the priest, and he would examine them and go through a series of exams and decide, is it spreading? Is this infectious disease spreading? And if it was, then he would instruct them, okay, you need to go isolate yourself from the rest of the people really in the world. And you need to leave your hair a mess. Unkempt is the word that's used. You need to leave your hair a mess. You need to wear old shabby clothes so that if somebody's walking, if they start to get within eyeshot of you, they can see, stay away. Because they had been pronounced unclean by the priest because of this infectious disease. And part of the reason for that isolation was it was terribly contagious. It was a nasty, nasty disease. And so this would also mean that they had to stay away from their families, their friends, their communities. All of that was history to the leper. And the law stated that they even had to, if someone did start to come close enough to them, they had to put their hand over their mouth and yell, "Unclean! Unclean!" as a warning. Stay away. Don't come near me. Man, can you imagine the isolation that would create for these guys? And all of this, by the way, is in addition to the brutal nature of the disease of leprosy itself. I don't know what you guys know about this disease, but it was a slow and painful killer that was caused by a slow-growing bacteria that primarily begins in the skin. And it begins to cause ulcers and lesions, open sores on the body, essentially your flesh rotting on your body. Very nasty stuff. And it would cause the people that had it to be deformed, because as those parts and pieces would start to rot, they would begin to lose fingers and toes, eventually whole limbs, or parts of limbs. And because it would attack the nerves, and they couldn't feel anything, a lot of them would lose their eyesight as well. And because they couldn't feel anything, and they would run into stuff and cut themselves and not even know that it had happened. And so they've got all these open sores and new wounds and things like that happening all the time. And so secondary diseases and infections would set in as a result. And eventually those people would be completely disfigured because of this disease. And eventually they would die from it, or a secondary infection, or some of the disease that came on board because of it. And so really, this disease that we were described it was a slow, painful, isolation-causing death sentence without a cure for those who had it back in the days down on them because they deserved this disease in their eyes. Because it was a punishment from God for their horrible behavior in their eyes. And now they're depending on those people to provide what they needed: food, clothing, etc. Clearly, these men would have been in a really, really bad way. I wonder if maybe that's why they were looking for Jesus. So let's get a running start now in verse 13. We're going to go back to the end of verse 12 because that sentence is cut in half with the verse mark 13. So let's read that whole sentence. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." You know, it's interesting, because even though these guys were living in isolation, apparently they heard about Jesus. They still had heard about Jesus. Maybe they heard about the miracles and the healing he'd been doing, you think? Even in their state of isolation. And so we can kind of conclude then that even among the outcasts of society, the knowledge and fame, let's call it that, of Jesus and his message and his healing power were spreading. Even among them. And now, here they are, hoping that Jesus would heal them as they had heard probably what Jesus had been doing for others. And now it was their turn. And their hope for Jesus caused them not just to call out to Jesus for help, but to actually also even kind of break the law and come close to crowds and people, because Jesus, wherever they traveled, right, met crowds with them. And they were willing to take that leap of faith and step up that way in their desperate and helpless and hopeless situation. You know, I know that probably none of us in this room have ever suffered from leprosy, and it's a curable disease at this point because of antibiotics and such. But I still think that we can relate to it. How many of us have been in dire and desperate situations in our lives that seem hopeless, and we need to cry out to Jesus for help? And we all pretty much relate that way. Even though maybe it wasn't as severe and ugly as the leprosy thing, we've all had our moments where we still kind of sense where these guys were. And so what was Jesus' reaction when they did this? Let's check out verse 14. When he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priest," and as they went, that's important, as they went, they were cleansed. And so first of all, again, as we've already discussed, lepers were outcasts of society. So let's pause. How are the outcasts of society treated? By and large. By and large, they tend to be ignored. Right? Looked right past. Maybe even looked right through, which is sometimes worse. You make eye contact with someone, you know that they saw you, and yet they just pretend like you don't matter or count at all. Isn't that kind of the treatment that the outcasts of society receive? And yet Jesus, quote, saw them. He wasn't afraid. And not only did he see them, he even spoke to them. What? Right? Many times we pass by people that are the outcasts of society. Oh, they got their invisibility coat on, right? Got the blinders on, and see, let alone stop and actually say something to them. And yet, Jesus even spoke to them too, gave them some instructions. And those instructions were going to require more action on their part in faith than just Jesus, boom, you're healed. He could have done that, but he didn't. And again, part of that was the requirement of the Old Testament law that I mentioned a minute ago in Leviticus. There was also laws on the books that said, okay, now let's say that you become healed from your infectious skin disease, leprosy. What are you supposed to do? Well, you go back to the priest and show yourself to him, and he's going to examine you and make sure that you're really healed, and then he's going to pronounce you clean. scriptures. This is just a Carl's mind turning. I'm wondering if they're like, there's nothing happening. What's the deal? I'm supposed to show myself to the priest. I'm not healed yet. And yet, in faith, they still followed his instructions. And through that in obedience, they ended up being healed. All 10 of them obeyed Jesus' instructions as they went. Out of that obedience, all 10 were healed. So what happened next? Let's check out verses 15 and 16 and see the reaction to this miraculous healing. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. So a few things we can talk about here. Again, we've already discussed the many consequences of being trapped in this disease of leprosy with all this physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual hopelessness that would be happening there. Now, can you imagine the overwhelming emotion of joy and elation and happiness and celebration that they would experience by being set free by Jesus from that monster? Can you imagine? Clearly, this Samaritan guy did sense all of that. And he returned to Jesus because he understood that incredible release from that prison of leprosy that he was going to die in if it wasn't for Jesus and intervening. Because even though Samaritans were considered, all of them, unclean by the Jews, not because of leprosy or anything else, we'll talk about that in a second. They were considered unclean by the Jews because of their mixed Jewish and Gentile blood. Essentially, they were half-breeds. And yet this man came back and threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And here was the rub between the Samaritans and the Jews, in a nutshell. God had commanded the Jewish people when they went into the promised land. He said, look, don't be intermarried with the people around you and the cultures around you because they don't worship you. They worship these false idols and they do it in disgusting ways. We talked about that in the past, right? Sexual sin out of just incredible, just going crazy with that. Killing their own children, sacrificing their own children to these gods that are not gods at all, and so on. And God's like, no, do not do that because they're going to lead you astray and take you down that path. So don't you be intermarrying with them. Well, the Samaritans, their ancestors, that's what they did. They intermarried. And so it was this mixed race now, and that's why the Jews had such an issue with them. But, clearly, this man's gratefulness for what this Jewish man, Jesus, had done for him, that wasn't going to stop him. No cultural divide was going to stop him from coming back and giving credit and praise to God and to Jesus for intervening and healing him. Nothing was going to stop him. He wasn't even going to be stopped or slowed down by the difficult task he would now have of trying to re-enter life around other people. I think sometimes we forget that too. That would be a hard adjustment going back. And would people accept you? Would they be willing to, oh, he had leprosy. Does he still got it? He might make me sick again. Right? I mean, there would be some real challenges for an individual, even though he's been healed, to kind of get back to life again. And yet, none of that stopped him. He was not about to let anything stand in the way of coming back and crying out to Jesus and throwing himself at his feet out of how grateful he was for what Jesus had done in healing him. But there was an issue that Jesus wanted to address. So let's go to verses 17 through 19 and see this. Those verses said, Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? Again, so we consider the Samaritans. spiritually as well, right? He was made whole. And again, part of that was because he returned to Jesus to give him praise and thanks. I'm going to ask you another one of those. Do you get the same idea, the same sense about something? I'm going to ask you one of those questions. Do you get the same sense in reading these verses that I do? Because as I read these verses, I see Jesus being frustrated. Very frustrated at the lack of gratefulness on the part of 9 out of 10 first lepers in his trade. He says that in his comment. In addition, I think we can draw from what Jesus said about none returning to give thanks, quote, except this foreigner, end quote. That at least some of those that were healed were Jews. God's own chosen and blessed people. Some of them were healed, and yet God's own chosen and blessed people didn't bother to return to give thanks to Jesus for what he'd done for them. You know, and we're not told specifically why the 9 didn't return. Yet I think we can list some possibilities. Maybe they were too busy enjoying the gift of healing that they had just received to go thank the giver of that gift. They were just so wrapped up in, wow, I'm better. But they forgot to go back and say, it's all because of you. Thank you. Maybe that was it. Maybe they were just eager to return to their family and friends and a normal life again. And they took their God and his gift of healing for granted. Maybe that was it. Maybe, and this seems to be something that's kind of welling up more and more. I'm seeing around me, and maybe you are too, that I shouldn't have been in this position in the first place. How dare God allow me to get this? Because I'm so awesome and wonderful. How dare I be allowed to be afflicted with this disease? He owed me. God owed me that healing, by golly. You know people like this? And so why would I return to give God thanks and praise for something he owed me anyway? Maybe it was that kind of an attitude. Who knows? We don't really know, but whatever the reason was, Jesus was clearly not happy about the ungratefulness on the part of 9 out of 10 of those guys. Why was Jesus so upset about this? You know, I think we have to get our hearts and our minds around this idea. At its heart, ungratefulness shows a completely selfish focus while ignoring God's goodness. Isn't that true? Because this selfish focus prevents appreciation for God, even when God has done something great for that ungrateful person. The selfish and ungrateful person always wants and even demands more. It's not enough, ever enough. More. I want more. And yet, the problem is that, again, that kind of death spiral. The ungrateful person is so wrapped up in themselves and their selfish desires and whatever, that no matter how much more help and blessing they receive from God, it's never enough. And they even tend to become critics of the many blessings that God has given to them and that they've received. Seems like they can always find something not to like about the assistance that they've been given. Well, I know I needed shoes, but I really wanted the Nike Airs. Right? There's always something to be critical about it. And the real danger is that ungratefulness to the Lord Jennifer, it's just for you. Here's the homework. I think it would be very valuable, because we don't have time to read all of it this morning, if you were to read Deuteronomy chapter 6, 7, and 8. Read those 3 chapters in their entirety. We're going to pull some chunks out of that to kind of talk about this point, but I think it would be good to see all of them. And so, as you're turning to Deuteronomy 6, verses 10 through 12, I want to give you some context. The Israelites are just about to go into the promised land and receive the blessing that they've been waiting for centuries. Okay? This land was promised to their forefathers, that he would eventually, to these Jewish people's forefathers, the Israelites, God was going to give them this land that was going to be a land that was, quote, flowing with milk and honey, end quote. Meaning, it's going to be abundant. And through that abundance, you guys are going to be blessed beyond measure. It's going to be awesome. Right? And so they're about ready to enter into that promised land. And in the first part of chapter 6, God just instructed them to constantly keep God at the forefront of their minds. Talk about me when you get up, when you lie down, when you're walking down the road, when you're sitting at your tables, etc., etc. And so God's talk had just finished encouraging the Israelites to do this and to make sure that they're passing their faith along to their children and their children and their children and so on and so forth. And to not forget Him. And then that's where we pick up in Deuteronomy 6, verse 10. When the Lord your God brings you into the land He swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then, when you eat and are satisfied, pausing for a second, in other words, when you've received all of this blessing that I've been promising for centuries for you to have, when that happens, verse 12, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now drop down to Deuteronomy chapter 8, just a couple pages later. Deuteronomy 8, verses 10, and the first part of verse 11. And here we see the same kind of thing. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land He has given you. Be careful, what? That you do not forget the Lord your God. And then we're going to read a warning that God issues against this. Not only forgetting Him, but also thinking that, well, I'm awesome. I did this all for myself. Me and my Lexitude went out and worked hard. I earned this all for myself. God didn't have anything to do with this. That kind of thinking that creeps in sometimes. Yeah, Deuteronomy 8, verses 17 through 19 say this. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. Right? That kind of thinking. But remember, verse 18, but remember the Lord your God. For it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your forefathers as it is today. In other words, that job that you have to make money, the ability that you have to do what you do, to be able to earn a living and do all of that, that is a gift from God. He is the one who gives us the ability to do that. And so at the end of the day, we still circle back to who do we give thanks and praise to? It's all God. And then verse 19, you're ready to be scared. If you ever forget the Lord your God and allow other gods and worship and bow down to them, and follow other gods and worship and bow down to them, I testify against you that you will surely be destroyed. That's pretty frightening, isn't it? It's a very somber warning. So what do we get from all this morning so far? Well, I think that we can never forget that every blessing that we've ever received is a gift from God. None of it is on us. We can never take God's physical blessings that He gives us, His providership, and his sacrifice and salvation for granted. We must always return and give praise to God for the good things he's done for us and that he's given to us. Because nothing we do could earn or deserve anything from God. Truly, all of it is a gift from him. And so my hope and prayer as we head into Thanksgiving, this Thursday, happy Thanksgiving, by the way, everyone. My hope and my prayer as we head into this Thanksgiving holiday this week is I pray that all of us have a renewed appreciation. I hope we do for and of God and Jesus. Whether it's those temporary physical gifts that we get to enjoy, again, money, jobs, food, clothes, houses, etc. Whether it's that stuff, but especially is the eternal gift of Jesus and the salvation that we gain through him because of that sacrifice. Because that gift far outweighs any physical gift we could ever receive. Amen, church? You know, and here's the thing. I know that there are some who are going to really struggle this week. Sometimes the holidays bring celebration, but other times they bring difficult memories, difficult circumstances coming to mind, etc. And I know that, whether it's a health thing or a financial thing or maybe relationships that have kind of been strained or broken, and that's just all that's kind of been grinding on you. I know that it's hard to see anything maybe to be grateful for. I get that. I understand that. Can I encourage you? If that's the place that you're in, I want to encourage you that even now, I hope you can see that you still have something to be thankful for. We're going to go to now the last scripture we're going to look at today is Habakkuk. That book we study a lot in the Old Testament. It's towards the end of the Old Testament, Habakkuk. And we're going to look at chapter 3, verses 17 through the first part of verse 19. And in context, essentially, Habakkuk is having this conversation back and forth with God. If you want extra credit, homework, Jennifer, go read the book of Habakkuk. It's only 3 chapters, so it's not that big, okay? I know, 6 whole chapters. You're welcome. You got a week to do it. Come on. But so Habakkuk and God have been having this back and forth. And essentially, Habakkuk is frustrated because he's trying to live a godly life and he sees all the wickedness around him. And he's frustrated. He's like, God, why aren't you doing anything about this? How come these people are so blessed? What's going on, God? Have you left the building? And God gives some news through Habakkuk that wrath is coming, and it is going to be brutal, and it is going to be ugly. So you just hang on, Habakkuk. Those who are evil and wicked and doing crazy stuff like that they shouldn't be doing, they're going to get their time's coming. So just be patient. And so at the end of that conversation with God, this is what Habakkuk, kind of his final thinking about it. He says this: though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vine, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls. In other words, even if there's nothing, I don't even know where my next meal's coming from, right? That's kind of the idea that we get here, right? Even if physically things are awful. Verse 18, yet I will praise, I will rejoice in the Lord, I will be joyful in God my Savior. He's going to praise. He's going to praise God. He's coming back to praise God even when physically everything looks like it's falling. Right? Verse 19, the sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to go on the heights. In other words, he enables me to get out of that dark valley that I might be in now and to go to the heights. There's world that can take away our joy in knowing Jesus and experiencing His salvation. Period. There's no more powerful testimony, by the way, for those of us that are struggling in hardship than when we're praising God even in the middle of that. Do you realize what a powerful witness that is? That we can praise God because of His salvation even in the middle of the most awful times. And so we should always be joyful and grateful in Jesus, our eternal Savior. We have that no matter what. Right? For those of us who have surrendered to Jesus, and let's be honest, Jesus alone is plenty to be thankful for when everything else has fallen. Here in a minute, not yet, but the band's going to come back up, and we're going to do the song of invitation. And it's a time when the elders will come and stand up front to receive any of you. And you want to start this relationship with this powerful Savior that we have, Jesus, the only Savior for all of us. Man, I hope if that's you, you're ready to rock today. Come on out, because we want to celebrate that decision with you. We want to talk about, okay, where do we go next? Baptism, discipleship, etc. We want to talk about all that too. And kind of start moving down that path. But here's the reality. That view that Habakkuk had that we just read about. You know, that only comes when we surrender to Jesus. Because that promises, even if everything's fallen, I still have Jesus, I still have God. It's only for those who have surrendered to Him. And it's through that hope and that promise of salvation that we can rejoice even in difficult times. That we can be grateful. That we can go back and thank God for what He has given to us. Right? Church, can we do this? We need to do this. And so I do want to encourage you, if you've never surrendered to Jesus, if you want to have that same kind of insight that Habakkuk had, come on, let's get this done. The band will go ahead and come back up now. And for the rest of us surrendered to Jesus, can I say this? Let's constantly go to the Lord with grateful hearts, giving Him the praise that He deserves every day, all day, not just one day here next Thursday. Are you with me, church? Can we be thankful to God? Think about what He has done for us, because here's the reality. Jesus has healed every one of us that have surrendered to Him from our spiritual leprosy, hasn't He? Because our souls were rotting inside of us before Jesus healed us from our spiritual leprosy. Right? Church, we need to be like that one leper. I know the world may be filled with ungratefulness, but surely we are not in that camp, right? Are you ready, church? Because here's the reality. Our lack of gratefulness gets in the way of the church in our lives being about Jesus. And others seeing just how great Jesus is and how great this relationship with God is in our lives. So it has to start with us. Are you ready, church? Are you ready? Even when everything else has fallen and our health has gone by the wayside, I'm falling apart on my knee all the time. This aging thing is not for the weak, is it? But I'm going to still rejoice no matter what's going on with me physically, because I have hope in our Lord and Savior, our God and King. Let's pray. Father, thank you. We do want to come to you and say thank you and be grateful to you for the incredible healing that you have given all of us spiritually that have surrendered our lives to you. You didn't have to do what it every single gift, every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father in the heavenly lights, is what you teach us in the Scriptures. Why do we always remember that? And never take you for granted. It's all about you, Jesus. It's all about your greatness and your goodness, your love and your mercy and your grace and your forgiveness and your faithfulness, and all of those great promises that you've given us. We continue to return to you with praise and thanksgiving, so we never have to worry about that curse that we read in Deuteronomy. But that isn't for us. Thank you, God, for opening our hearts and our minds and our eyes and our ears to yes, we need to be grateful, and we can be grateful no matter how rough our physical circumstances are. All because of you, Jesus, and it's in your name we give praise and thanksgiving. Amen. You can feel free to stand or sit, whichever one was the blood of mine. Glory to His name.
Heavenly Father, we come to you at this time. We're thankful for everything you provide. Most of all, we're thankful for the gift of your Son, who is sent here to cover the debt of our sins with his blood, so that we may have eternal life with you in heaven. It is in his name that I pray. Amen.
Man, do we have a lot to be thankful for. Man, I am thankful for all of you. Thank you guys for being here today. Again, just some housekeeping items. One, we do the offering a little different now. You give online and use the QR code, scan on the back of the chair, or there's a couple of trays as you leave this area. You can drop your offerings in there if you prefer. Also, Terry asked if I would mention that we had a vote last week and everything on that kit was approved, just so you guys know. You know what's going on. So that's a thing, and I hope you guys do have a great week, like every week, you know? And so be thankful. Can we do that? Man, we have so much abundance, so much blessing. We truly do live in a land that's flowing with milk and honey. And I know we have times where it's short. I get that. I've been there too. But by and large, how blessed are we, right? And so I'm going to pray us out, and then things can rock us out. And again, I pray that you have an amazing week. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. Father, thank you for this time that we were able to gather together to give you the honor and the glory and the praise and show you our gratefulness. God, I pray that we continue to do this moment by moment, day by day. That it's not just a flash in the pan, but we are constantly in a state of gratefulness that keeps us returning to you, giving you the praise and the glory that you should have, and that is due to you. God, I pray over this congregation as we leave this building that you would watch over us spiritually, keep us safe that way. Keep us focused on you again. Being grateful is a huge piece of that. And God, I also pray for our physical safety too, as I know many will be traveling or have loved ones traveling to them over this coming week. And so give us safe travels, Lord, and all our loved ones safe travels as well. Mostly, God, though, we just give you praise. We just thank you for what Jesus has done for us, the hope that we have, the incredible hope that we have. And God, I pray that you will fill our hearts with joy and gladness that overflows where we just can't help but give you praise and be grateful and thankful to you. Fill our spirits that way, Lord, with
do all things, and to you, yes, we sing. Nothing is impossible.